Assalamu alaikum, people listening and watching. You're tuning into the Let's Walk podcast. I am your host, Ataur Rahman. It's been a while. We have been recording the podcast, and the last podcast was with Talat Mazhar. And today we have a phenomenal guest on with us today. And I took a month to read his book, and then a couple of weeks to, try to understand him, go through his interviews and see what message he's trying to say and about his work as well in various other domains. So today joining me is Daneesh Majid. He's the author of the book, which is obviously, I'm sure everyone has seen on social media as well. I've been reading and posting day by day, what chapter I've been reading. So the Hyderabadis from 1947 to the present day. And the book has also won the Ramnath Goenka Sahithya Samman Award
Long
22
listed, long listed.
long listed and best for the best debut by the Indian Express Group. And he also has an MA from SOAS, and he has worked with Siyasat and Islamic Relief USA as well, and he has also studied public policy, which we'll go into later. So, Danish, thank you so much for joining us today. Although the schedule was a little up and down, but yeah, thank you so much for making time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So maybe I want to start off with the first share that you had in your book as well. Right? It was शिराज बहारे गुल तर बिखर गए अब किसको बताएं कि जेब चमन है कौन कश्मीर में कोई तो कराची में है कोई ए जोर किससे पूछिए अहले दक्कन है कौन and this is शेर by Mohyuddin Qadri Zor. So I want to start with the elephant in the room kind of question is who is a Hyderabadi? Now, somebody who has stories from listening from my grandfather that, we used to live in Aurangabad. Somebody, having migrated from other state, they lived in Hyderabad. So now everyone is fighting for that piece of Hyderabad. I'm a Hyderabadi. And then obviously with a lot of Telugu influence, now it has become like more like Telangana. Mana Telangana, Mana Telangana. And so I want to ask this question is like a two-part question. Who is a Hyderabadi geographically and who is a Hyderabadi in spirit? Like, what does it mean to be a Hyderabadi? As in, what is the spirit of a Hyderabadi? So maybe we can start off with this one.
Excellent question to start off with. You mentioned who is a Hyderabadi geographically. Geography and culture and spirit. These are very fluid definitions. लेकिन अगर हम लोग geographic तौर से बात करें ना, so during the Nizam's time, even Kadapa for a certain amount of time was a part of the Nizam state. So Telugu influence, one can say, tab se bhi tha. So geographically, being a Hyderabadi has various different connotations and denotations. क्योंकि Hyderabad city अलग रहता और तेलंगाना के districts भी अलग रहते. And even when there was a united Andhra Pradesh, Andhra Muslims are even seen as totally different creatures as per the ideals and notions of Hyderabadi Muslims. So for me, though, a Hyderabadi is someone who doesn't necessarily ascribe to one single idea of what a language is, whether it's सिर्फ तेलुगु बोलना या सिर्फ उर्दू बोलना और वो उर्दू में सिर्फ दक्कनी सिटी वाली दक्कनी उर्दू बोलना क्योंकि I have been told by certain people अरे तुम कभी कभी डिस्ट्रिक्ट वालों के जैसा कहीं को बात करते वो है हम लोगों में like मुसलमान हो या कुछ भी हो district wala is seen as an alien creature at times. So for me, a Hyderabadi is someone who's just assimilated into this city's culture without forcing their idea of what a quote unquote true Hyderabadi is on somebody else. So I hope that answers both your questions from the geographic and the cultural standpoint.
Totally. So it is like more sort of an accepting nature that, it brings it's like Hyderabadi spirit is like with open arms, right?
Absolutely. I mean, while I won't say that this outsider versus son of the soil These debates are alien to Hyderabad, that we've never seen them. Mulki struggle aap dekh rahe hain. Yeah, we don't even need to go back that far. We were seeing what's going on with this Marwari हटाओ ये बचाओ ये this campaign. So ये हमेशा से रहा है, कुतुब शाही के जमाने से रहा है. So we're not immune to that, but I am proud to say that this quote unquote son of the soil versus quote unquote outsider schism that has plagued other cities, it's not as prominent in Hyderabad.
Totally. And in fact, I don't know if we can count Facebook posts like legit like Facebook posts or post authenticity, but they said like Hyderabad is like one of the most hospitable cities in India. So I mean, I can sometimes, like when it's I'm a little biased, so I'll just take that as absolute truth. So I mean, a lot of people even tell me that you don't sound like somebody living in old city, because we have some sort of like Marathi, or some sort of like when we get angry, some sort of dialect or some things we say which is not like proper old city baigan mirchi, are like that kind of thing. So so I think like people, due to movies and culture, they have sort of a cupcake idea of what a Hyderabadi should be like, and maybe that is why people feel like, oh, so you live in old city and you speak like this, so you're not a Hyderabadi, or like you're not from here or something like that. Anyways, moving on to the next thing. Uh, while writing the book, you had three main goals, right? Which you listed out in the prologue. So does that kind of like from a writer's point of view, does that kind of put you does that make you a little biased, and like not for like miss out on some stories, or do you take even contradicting evidence also and try to see if it is the truth, and you try to include that just from a writer's point of view?
So I have been getting a lot of good-natured as well, not necessarily one of the detracted ones of the detracting type. I've been getting certain comments. अरे आप इनको बोलना था, आप इनके बारे में लिखना था. Maslan Sanjay Baru, he in his review for The Wire for my book, he wrote that why couldn't Danish have covered, Parsis of Hyderabad? What about other Kayas like Ellen Gupta? But friendly correction to Mr. Baru. Ellen Gupta Kayas nahi the. Unu Marwari the. Lakshmi Narayan Gupta jo the, he was Maniklal Gupta, who was a prominent leftist during the OU Comrades Association's days of the 20s and 30s. He was a member back then. So ऐसे तो बहुत आते, but a lot of people have also said, why not Brahmo Khatris? Jo Mahara Kishan Prasad. He was the prime minister under two different nizams. So it wasn't always necessarily a question of full bias. It was a question of access. As you've read, बहुत सारे first hand stories भी है, लेकिन second hand stories भी है. अब that generation who saw partition, police action, वो लोग, that's dying away. Even my grandfather, he recently died back in July. जब तक उनका इंतकाल नहीं हुआ, I used to have it in my mind that अरे चलो 5-10 साल, अभी 5 साल तो है at least, yeah, maybe 10 साल if we're lucky, but ever since उनकी death हो गई, I've been even more cognizant of the fact that these stories are running out. So some of those stories were first hand, but some were second hand. I can't go back in a time machine and get those first hand stories. And yes, generation by generation dilute होते जाते stories. So it was ultimately about access. Some people one person even said to me, he was a prominent editor, used to serve as an editor for a prominent regional newspaper. He said, Telangana, Telugu, jisse aap baat kare, you've only selected people of a certain caste. And I said, very valid point, sir, but these are the people who I had access to. But I'd like to come back to what you said about bias. I will admit there's a certain prevalence of, Hyderabadi Muslims, or a city ka perspective hai, NRI ka bhi perspective hai mere andar, because I'm an outsider at the end of the day. formative years, elementary and high school, were not exactly spent in Hyderabad, mostly summers or winters. So you will feel that the perspective, the lens which I'm kind of looking at it through, granted, I've tried to encompass many different perspectives by consulting different sources, अलग-अलग background, मज़ाहिब के लोगों से, अलग-अलग communities के लोगों से बात करके, but you will notice that there's a slight, coloring with which I look at certain issues. And because ultimately that's the background that I come from. And even Quratal and Heather ki kitab jo hai, mostly her books, whether it's Aaka Darya, Mere Bhi Sanam Khane, which I'm reading, she was from a landed zamindar family of Lucknow. So wo zara, a lot of leftists say, and rightfully so, I'll admit, they look her way of looking at the world is very elite. So granted, I come from a certain, privileged background, but I've done my best in the ways that I've told you to encompass different perspectives.
And and obviously, like you said, you can't go back in time. But are you open to more stories, which maybe you can feature in a revised edition, or an just like after a movie's release, they have like an extended version. I'm not sure like what happens in a book, but there are like lots of stories because the other day I was in a Zikr Mahfil and I came to know my Bade Taya. Bade Taya is, I'm sure you understand, right? So he went to like people back in the day used to go to that's like Bade Taya. That time, they used to go to Iraq and Iran.
Mhm,
That was like the before the Saudi boom, it was the Iraq and Iran boom.
mhm.
And I was like, now he's no more. Like nobody knows what happened that time, right? So like those stories, and then obviously the other Thai was also in siyasat, so I never got to
Oh,
speak to them. So like all intellectual people, different. So are you open to stories? Maybe that's Parsi, Hyderabadis, or people even in South Africa. There's a huge population in South Africa as well. So, if you're like open to those kinds of things for a revised edition or an extended version of your book, or your like the way James Clear has notes for his book. So, is that something you think about?
absolutely. If I come across certain stories and these families, they have interesting interesting anecdotes about what went on with them, their grandparents or their grandkids, or with these people themselves from 48 to 47/48 to the present day. Why not? Ultimately, you have to have an angle as well. What's new? Kya fresh hai ye story mein to tell? And I felt like these 10, 11 families which I chronicled, they each had some very interesting trajectories, which would be very appealing to readers. And these are stories that have been out there, but kya hai hamare Hyderabad mein? I don't know why. Uh, well, actually, I do know why, but I don't want to say it too much. But I think there are other reasons as well. Many, talented people who have a knack for finding these stories, chronicling these histories, micro or macro, they just haven't been able to put them down in, chronicle them and have them released in via accessible narratives to, reputed publishing houses, which aren't located in Hyderabad. They're located in Delhi. Most of these publishers, Simon Schuster, Harper, etc., 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 Delhi mein hai. And I just wish I wasn't the first one to do it. We need more of these stories out there. But as time goes on, at least first-hand iterations of these memories, they're not going to be as accessible as they once were, as early as 3, 4 years ago, even.
Yeah, and time is ticking. I'm talking about 2012, 13, where I wanted to come and speak to my Bade Taya and everyone, because spending time in siyasat also, and I wanted to understand like what was their life moving from Aurangabad and everything. But like I said, coming back from Saudi myself, and we never got the access, like the trying to introduce and building the bond so that they open up. It takes a lot of time. And before I started this podcast, in fact, one of my first podcasts was with my Dada Hazrat before he passed away. So I documented like some of by asking like what are his political views about marriage, why divorces are happening left and right, and uh, crazy things. So this is something I think about, because the coming generations, they do not have an account of history from the people they have lived. Whatever they are studying, that is their point. That is something they are understanding as history, which is obviously being fabricated, manipulated, and it is being washed up, and everyone is seeing it. Is not just my opinion or somebody else's opinion. So I feel like if people have stories, maybe they can reach out to you, and obviously maybe we can hopefully get to see a new an extended version of your book.
I would love that. And maybe I'm open to exploring your family story as well. क्योंकि मैं city वाला हूँ at the end of the day. मेरे मेरे parents भी city वाले. But वो औरंगाबाद का connection भी है मेरा, as you read in the third chapter. My paternal grandfather, he was stationed in Aurangabad during police action, and you read how he basically escaped the clutches of death. It was almost like the show Narcos, if you've seen the first season of that show. Line में खड़ा करके soldiers are firing, and he just happened to survive that barrage of bullets, and he just faked death for a little while. So if I further happened, I'll implore people to read the book. But yeah, it's good to know that both of us have that Aurangabad connection.
I mean, it almost, when I read that, how people were made to stand in a line, it almost reminded me of, how we used to read about the Holocaust, what happened in Germany, and, people like just taking bodies and, throwing it away. Anyways, so recently, I've been on this spree of, going and watching dramas. Dramas as in like theatrical performances happening in Lamakan, Rangbhumi, different.
Mhm.
So there was this recent play by Samhara Ratnashekar sir. He has directed that, and it was titled Ma Bhumi, meaning our earth, and it is about the rural people, their struggles against the Razakar and Nizams, and along with the British. And there's like a new breed of actors. They had their first performance. It Everything was fine, but if they failed to point out that it is not the Razakars or the Nizams. There's also Deshmukhs and uh, Deshpandes or Patels or whatever in between. It is a very what do you call it, symbiotic relationship between them, which is fostering this. And obviously they have shown that there's like a old Muslim uncle, and then there's like a character Subhan and everyone, and then there's like a Hindu family, they're struggling, somebody's coming and beating them up. So but at the same time, they are pushing a narrative where a certain section of society is being portrayed in a certain way, in a, I would say, a darker shade. So why do you think that even though everything is very gray and we can show it as it is, why do we have to always make one side? Is it for the sake of film art that one side always has to be black, or what is it?
It's interesting that you mentioned this play. I've never heard of this specific drama, or when and how, or where it's been being exhibited until you just told me right now. But when you said the name Mambhumi, I'm sure you must have read in the epilogue of the book that there was a book by Urdu ki kitab thi by Krishan Chandar, one of the progressive one of the progressive stalwarts of the Urdu world back in the day. So he wrote a novel called Jab Khet Jage, and that was a brilliant novel. And Krishan Chandar is one of those people who chronicled the ground realities of whether it was princely Jammu Kashmir, the Punch districts of Jammu Kashmir. I'm forgetting the name of that novel which I read, or which chronicles the what used to go on in the J&K during the Maharaja rule, or what happened during Nizam rule in the Telangana districts. And that was a brilliant book. And there was a film adaptation of it titled Mabhumi as well. So, but one thing I liked about both, whether it was the original or the source material, it didn't look at the schism between the oppressor and the oppressed solely in religious terms. We have to admit that this was a Muslim ruled state which lorded over a Hindu majority. But at the same time, there were these co-opted strata, like you mentioned, the Deshmukhs, from the Reddy Rao Velma caste, and ये जो revenue agents जो रहते थे, the Patwari always used to be a Niyogi Brahmin. I'm not saying this. Inukunda Tirumali की किताब against Dora and the Nizam में लिखा हुआ है, and I cite that in my book as well. So that particular drama which you mentioned and which is being exhibited, I've never heard of it, but I think if that drama is what colors certain things a certain way, which you described it, then I think maybe it's time for them to perhaps revisit how they portrayed certain dynamics of what went on in Telangana at that time. But that's अब आजकल का माहौल यही है. रजाकार पिक्चर भी देखो, वही हो रहा है. Oppressed Hindu versus oppressor Muslim. When no, Reddys, Raos, even certain Brahmins of Telangana, they're very much a part of this system. That was a major burden on the peasants' back. And these peasants just didn't include Hindus. Some of them were Muslims. Sheikh Bandagi की कहानी मैं चुक्का रमैया के चैप्टर में बयान करा. So yeah.
And obviously, meaning like on the stage we see, there's a Deshmukh, and he has his I would say a guard, whose name is Mustafa, or like some typical name, and he goes down and he beats the locals and everything. But it is somehow it is always shown that he's under a pressure from Nizam to like generate revenue. He's like that insurance guy who has to meet his sales target, and he's very very under pressure. He doesn't like it, but he's doing it. So, but in fact, it is how they are making money using the Nizam support, and obviously Nizam is also working in hand with them. So it was a great show. I mean, I loved the acting, but I felt that a better portrayal of the story should have been done instead of like certain dynamics being like played around, because obviously people once people are like leaning towards one side, it's easy to play on that while trying to show the other way. Anyways, so you also teach Urdu to people, and when I was in school, my Urdu teacher used to say that there'll come a time where Urdu will be removed from the CBSE. And I used to think like, what a joke, just because, nobody's taking your Urdu class, you're saying that, people will, uh, but in fact became a reality. And a lot of people, uh, I feel that is maybe because, Urdu was limited to Urdu Day, and in embassy we used to have some romantic poetry contest, and Urdu was limited to that and some debates, that there were no specific jobs which maybe require Urdu other than specific universities, that the like use of Urdu, reading and writing of Urdu nowadays, a lot of grown adults, they don't know how to read or write Urdu. And like, is it why this demise of Urdu is coming, or what do you think is the issue? Like, should Urdu be put in some jobs so that people like are guaranteed employment, that way they learn Urdu? Like, what is the reason? Why do you have this motivation to teach Urdu?
So I teach Urdu script, बस रस्मुल खत सिखाता हूँ मैं. This motivation for teaching Urdu was, there is a demand for it, but one thing I've been seeing with my previous students and some potential students, there's a demand to be, that demand is more is sometimes synonymous with just becoming acquainted with the exotic aspects of Urdu. Oh, I love Ghalib. I love quoting Mir, ये सब फैज का हम देखेंगे या बोल के लब आजाद है बोलना. You seem a little, it's a way to kind of make yourself to present yourself as cultured or progressive. But what I do with my Urdu classes, I literally alif be pe se shuru karta hu main, and it's not glamorous. I do what I can to incorporate, certain verses in poetry as I, teach certain letters and words that start with those letters. But that motivation was to also see how motivated people are. Okay, a lot of different, great organizations who are doing great work, they offer classes, but I'm just not sure as to how many students they've churned out who actually, have taken to the script, are going to bookstores, buying, not, and I don't mean crossword or these big chain bookstores, actually going to kutub khanas in the bazaars of Old Delhi, या अपने हैदराबाद के चौक में. Because ultimately, once people read the script, then they're only able to buy. Na, you have to have it's not just as simple as supply and demand. So that's why I wanted to teach Urdu and play my part in in doing whatever I can to at least try and get a substantive revival going. Okay, while I think certain festivals are doing a good job by showcasing the language through festivals that happen yearly, celebrities ko bulana, those festivals and those organizations, they generate awareness and attention and revenue, of course. At the end of the day, it's a money making exercise. Even for me, I charge a certain amount per month to teach the script. But to what extent it's getting people to actually take to the script, I don't know. Because it also requires a lot of discipline. It's not as simple as, ek do classes low and then you just drop out. I mean, that I have seen that, and I've seen that more common among apne Hyderabadiyan, Delhi wale, and certain people from other parts of the country, more so towards the north. Un logo mein, they actually have that inkling to, go through a bit of a grind, because script seekhne ke liye, you need to have that discipline. Do the assignment once and ask questions when you're unsure, and keep up with it and practice, and always ask the instructor. Nahi to, I mean, I'm just not sure what a lot of people look to accomplish by, just reciting a few verses of fairs, or going to elite ghazal parties, which I think help, and that should happen. But ultimately, that was my motivation, and there have been some great students who, who stuck with it. And yeah, there I was for a little while. I was just like, when a lot of Hyderabadi students were dropping out, I was like, is it me who's the problem? But then in one batch where I just had 3 students from Delhi, they stuck with it. Tab I was like, chalo. Because ultimately you also apne girban mein jhaan ke dekhna padta. But yeah, I'm proud to say that it's not my method. Apne Hyderabadiyon mein malum na, they're just a little lackadaisical with certain things, and discipline ka zara thoda taqaza hai. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah, I can understand. So, look, although like it's the same with other languages as well. There was this Arabic class I was a part of, and I don't know who it was in our batch. And the first day they asked, why do you want to learn Urdu? Why do you want to learn Arabic? So somebody was like, I want to order a shawarma in Arabic. So, like, when you have things coming up like that, so now the entire focus is like, okay, so like there are like 3, 4 types of shawarmas. How do I say it in Arabic? My job's done. So if somebody has a bigger goal, they'll try to stick around, I guess. I guess that's it. And or otherwise, until they learn like 3, 4 Ghalib shares, and then they're like, I'm done, I'm out. Now this is what I'm going to put on my status. Everywhere I go is the same share on repeat. So that is that. There's one more thing I want to probably ask is I have a friend, and whenever we meet people and we have a similar face, so people used to ask, "Oh, are you guys brothers?" And he used to say, "No, no, no. My name is whatever his name is." and his name is Ata. And he used to say, nenu Telugu, vadu Muslim. So I used to think that how come Telugu has become a religion or some sort of like an identity. A Muslim has become a different identity, and I've seen this not with one friend but a lot of friends. Do you think like this certain thing I'm missing out, like in terms of like dynamics or something like that? Or is he trying to
But
say I'm a Hindi speaking by saying Muslim?
that's the sad part, of language and religion ka conflation jo ho gaya hai. It's very, very sad. And but since you're talking about this binary, Telugu, Hindu, Urdu, Muslim, Andhra ke Musalmano, I'm sure you've spoken to them, na? Telugu pundits, I would call them. Oh my lord, I think they know better Telugu than a lot of, by better I mean proper, actually. I should say they know their proper Telugu is better than the quote unquote proper Telugu of Telangana. And back then, a lot of older Telangana folks Urdu वही school में पढ़ते थे उन लोग. And there was in the districts, एक असगर बोल के एक शायर थे, उनका तखल्लुस असगर था. He was actually a Rao Telugu. So unfortunately, these are times where it's just really simple to label something as intrinsic only to a specific community and religion, and that kind of rhetoric, it just gained a lot of currency. But we don't need to go that far back in history to see how some of the best Urdu writers were Hindus and Sikhs from Punjab. Gulshan Nanda, jo Pale Khan likhe the, Rajinder Singh Bedi. Oh my lord! I mean, his short stories are amazing. So these people were from West Punjab, jo Pakistan ka Punjab hai. So it's quite sad, the state of affairs regarding the language and how become a it's become a smokescreen for a lot of communal battles that people are trying to create and have somewhat been there from before as well.
And since you mentioned Pakistan as well, reading your book, I was a little shocked that you mentioned this aspect as well, and you included stories where people had relations in
Mm.
Pakistan. Because when I first arrived in India, and I had a lot of friends, and they said, "How? Why do you follow people from Pakistan?" And I was really shocked because when I lived back there, it was all Desi community, Indian Pakistanis, and obviously, people didn't include the like Bengali people. I'll be very honest. Uh, but
Yep.
Indian and Pakistanis, they were like tight. They used to be there together, and even if not as relatives, I have a lot of friends, and we enjoy their sense of humor. They enjoy our sense of humor, and there's some common things as well. But but in times like now, if somebody living in Hyderabad says I have a connection in Pakistan, it means a very different thing. I mean, like people take it in a very different way. Do you think like people are ready to digest stories, or people are ready to accept on a major scale that people like this exist? Because a lot of my relatives do exist that way, but it's very low key, you know they don't tell it in open. I don't know, what's your take on that?
Excellent question. But before I answer that, I have one small question for you because you've been mentioning the Gulf connection. So before I answer that, can you tell me Saudi Arabia mein kahan the? Which city were you in?
So I was there in Jeddah, I was there in Riyadh as well.
Acha, मैं भी जिद्दा वाला हूँ तो yeah. So you must know the Azizia locality
Yes,
and
yes, I lived
oh
there.
yeah. Acha, then it'll give good context as well to you as well. So, but to get back to your question, it's funny that you mentioned this. Because on my Instagram, I just uploaded a photo of two of my friends from Lahore holding my book up right now. So, and I, for me, that's really heartening. And these are my friends, jo London mein hum log saath the. I don't even need to go back as far as my Jeddah, Saudi Arabia days. This is my time during SOAS. So Hamad and Hassan, they got the they Hassan gave the book to his copy, Hamad his copy as well. फिर गाड़ी के बाहर एक फोटो लिए वो दोनों किताब के साथ. So and and then it was also uploaded to Facebook. फिर इमाद बोल के मेरा ब्रिटिश पाकिस्तानी दोस्त, he writes in a comment saying, well done, boys. Where did you get your copies? I ordered mine. So it's so, for me, I grew up around these folks. I mean, you more so. Because this little bubble of Azizia, Rehab, Mushrafa, you had all these Indian, Pakistani restaurants. And yeah, granted, there in certain cases there might not have been some love lost between us. However, at the end of the day, we were also in the same boat as expatriates, dealing with some of the prejudices that the Saudi Arabs had against us, and we were all in the same boats, trying to make money, not just for our sustenance, but to also send money back home. You and I, we've seen our parents grind and take a lot of flack from these people, but for me, you know why? Because I don't have family in the government echelons. I just a few weeks ago I visited some old family friends. They said that 80s 90s mein, my father, he used to work for the Andhra Pradesh government, but because he had those government links, anytime you see, we would not write to Pakistan, we would not fax, we would not call our relatives in Pakistan. We are just afraid somehow कुछ coordinate हो गया दुबई में, जिद्दा में, शायद, maybe. So, but to bring it back to my book, there was a day when my uncle also told me, मेरे नाना मरहूम, he said 65 से पहले, when it was a little easy to go to travel between India and Pakistan, क्योंकि बोला जाता है असल तकसीम जो हुआ हिंदुस्तान पाकिस्तान का 65 में हुआ, when it wasn't easy to traverse the borders as it was before because of the 65 war. So my nana and my uncle, they told me that 65 से पहले अगर कोई बच्चा हैदराबाद में, if he wasn't doing well in studies, getting into wrong company या कुछ तो भी ऐसा हो रहा था, they used to say पाकिस्तान भेजो उसको, अपने खाला है वहां पे. As you read in chapter 6, Ali Adil Khan's father, he came back to Hyderabad to get married after after his trip, his training in the US. So आसान था बहुत, it was still intact. So for me, it's just a little odd, ये जो Hindustan Pakistan की जो rivalry, yeah, certain issues do need to be worked out, and hope they do, and we can debate. And yeah, one side definitely needs to curb certain activities of it, so as to not derail the peace processes, as happened in 1999, 2000, 2008, and 2016, 15/16 as well. But for me, I don't know. I subscribe to this notion of Benazir Bhutto. Every Indian has a little has a Pakistani in them, and every Pakistani has a Indian in them. And I think for us, that's always been the case because हम लोग Gulf में पले बड़े, and I also have the North America connections. But I do hope that I can get to go and see my family in Karachi, and they did come here in 2013 and 2000s maybe aate the. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And in fact, there's some close family, who actually married, Indian Hyderabadi married a Pakistani, and they lived quite a few years in Jeddah, and they had to kind of get. But when they came to India, there's always like a lot of issues. They want to get permissions and everything. But it is kind of tough to explain it to an Indian, what sort of life we had, because I played cricket. Most of my coaches, teammates were Pakistanis, and I learned a lot from them. But I wouldn't be able to explain them or communicate them because of the brainwashing they have had since school. That is something I feel is something, a work in progress, but that maybe they'll understand by just by being with us. I guess we just can't explain it to them intellectually.
And I just feel because that hatred or that aversion, it's not solely seen on this side of the border. I've come across many hawks from Pakistan as well, and they're like, नहीं ये कभी नहीं हो सकता, हम तो कभी नहीं जाएंगे वहां पे. And I mean, it goes back to what Manmohan Singh says. I mean, Manmohan Singh, he was our the Narendra Modi's predecessor's prime minister. I can never forget one thing he said. He said, our ancestors, they used to have breakfast in Amritsar, lunch in Lahore, and dinner in Kabul. हमारे बड़े ही ऐसा ही करते थे, and this is what we owe to our future generations. So, but I just think, with both establishments, India and Pakistan, those two words have become more, rhetorical talking points to rile people up, and unless people like us have, grown up in these places where that baggage isn't there, it'll be a little tough for them to understand it. But I remember 2004 se leke 2008 tak, that process did start among, no, and it didn't require Indians or Pakistanis to meet in quote unquote neutral territory of North America or the Middle East. People to people exchanges ho rahe the, cricket ke visas pe aa rahe the. And since you mentioned shadi as well, one of my cousins, also a Hyderabadi Pakistani, Jeddah mein hum log milte the, but वो हरा इस्लामी जमहूरिया पाकिस्तान का पासपोर्ट था उस टाइम पे. Now he then he now he's in Qatar. So he got married to one of his cousins, his Hyderabadi cousins. He could come easily क्योंकि visas वो टाइम पे जरा आसानी से दे रहे थे. और उनकी engagement, I remember this very well, summer 2008 में हुई थी. And I think they were just very positive that चलो अब मामला ये peace process हो जाएगा, and eventually if the girl wants to come back and visit her family in Hyderabad, it won't be too much of a big deal. It'll be like US Canada, which is also going through an interesting phase, but that's a different story. But then 5-6 महीने फिर क्या हुआ? 26/11. So it's not impossible if both the establishments, sort out a lot of their internal issues and a lot of issues with each other. It's not impossible. You saw that time, but I was in, like, from grade. This was from when I was 13 to 19. Like 14 se 19, age 14 se 19 tak, I've seen India-Pakistan relations at their best. It's not impossible. It can happen.
I mean, I'm just hoping for the best. And with this, I want to move into we've touched upon like the Pakistan story as well, and then there is like the Gulf story as well. People who went to the Gulf, that gave them a lot of access to opportunity and also to get their feet, and also establish themselves both in Saudi, in the Gulf, and in India. But with that, I also observed that it also brought in the tight white thobe, which also brings with itself a little inflexibility of mind. Because if you see, you've been touring for your book, and you've seen people from those times, they still wear the kurta pajama, whether they're Hindus or Muslims. But when you come in with a thobe, which alienates you from society, obviously not the best thing with the climate where you have like mud and dust everywhere, and also a certain brand of Islam. Do you think it creates a lot of rift in society and a lot of alienation when all that kurta pajama was is plain and simple? It is like that plain dosa, like nobody, it is very underrated, but it is like the best thing one can have. Do you think?
Good question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah. I was just saying, like, what's your thoughts on that, or like, am I missing something in that?
let me start off by saying मुझे वो चूड़ीदार कुर्ता पैजामा भी बिल्कुल पसंद नहीं. I don't like it. I'm actually more of the Pathani. The India में Pathani बोलते, but in on the other side of the border, it's just the shalwar, and it's very common among even in Indian Punjab, दावतों में that loose shalwar, and then that kurta with the collar. That is my comfy dress. How they call comfort food. That is my comfortable dress. And my dad, he does not like it. He is a he's a very he's a very old traditional Hyderabadi guy. I remember ek bar I was wearing to a wedding, that shalwar and that kurta with a blazer on top. He then says, अंदर जाके कपड़े बदलो, रोहेले दिख रहे तुम पुराने जमाने के. क्योंकि वो जमाने में that's somewhat what's the जो हैदराबाद में पठान आते थे, the rohelas, the money lenders, that's how they used to dress. And so, but this thobe as well. Let me tell you something a little more personal about this thobe. For me, that Kikuri is also it's tight, right? The thobe is also tight. So I personally didn't like it, but that rice type, the rice made of Shah Rukh Khan penta, I was glad for a bit that he made that in vogue. Okay, I was like, yes, finally. So, but I mean, it's not just the thobe that's also been imported. Certain, rigid aspects. Again, I don't want to insult or start a fiqh debate or say, but it is a little interesting how certain practices have from the Gulf have become commonplace. For instance, there is that eternal debate. Dargah ko gaye to zara kuch zara problem hai kuch log. They say merely stepping into a dargah amounts to biddat. For some people, dargah is like wahin pe jaake they ask mannat wahin wo peer se mangte. I like to consider myself a bit in the middle ground. I do go and pay respects, and the khawali is just beautiful to hear. And there's an energy in those dargah. But then, again, this is just me not trying to force my views on somebody else, but asking ye peer se khud dua mangna, I mean, that connection upar wale ke saath khud rakho. But these are debates that have been very, very prominent in society. And unfortunately, it's also divided people along these lines internally. It's not just a sectarian thing, but it's a very I've seen certain old group of friends when they go to Nizamuddin for old college, which I've heard this fan story मैं बोल रहा हूँ मैं तुमको. One person, he was like, नहीं हम सलफी है, हम लोग नहीं जाते ये सब वो सब. And another of the friends he was from a silsila, I think Qadri silsila के थे He's like, how do you say this? ये सब वो सब. So yeah, but good things have also come in from the Gulf as well too. I'm not gonna deny that. So unfortunately, and as you read in the book, some kaists who are part of that old, Ganga Jabni nahi, Isa Musi Tehzeeb, that जो religious practices भी थोड़े same थे कायस्तों के. उन लोगों के घरों में halal गोश्त भी बनता था. They've said that brand of Islam that has come in, we don't like it. So, but at the same time, there's certain habits जो पुराने हमारे feudal जो थे मुसलमानों के, which I think maybe Gulf also fixed as well. थोड़ी वो अकड़ हम लोग में निकली that हम ये नवाबा है, हम ये वो है, एक humbling हुआ हम लोगों का. So yeah.
The reason I asked this question is because I recently had I had the opportunity to go for a Vipassana meditation at Dhammaketa. So it is nearby Nagarjuna Sagar. So it's like 10 days. Are you aware of Vipassana meditation?
Yeah, it's I've known a few friends who do it for like a week and a half. They just they're in a room and it's just silence.
Yes.
And if you ask that Pandit one thing, all he says is sab anitya hai. Interesting. बस इतना ही बोलता है वो पंडित, or that whoever who's spearhead that, or whoever is guiding you through that process. So yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
So it's basically no speaking, no technology, and like some precepts for 10 days, and it kind of helps in resetting. I would say it's like a good digital detox. So what happened is that people who are involved in the admission process, which is very rigorous, because 10 days without access from society, people can go into like madness, or like fears from inside can pop up, and
Mm.
anxiety. So one of the administrators, he asked me, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Hyderabad. He's like, Hyderabad में ही कहाँ से हो? And I was like, मैं पुराने शहर से हूँ, old city से हूँ. So his face lit up, his eyes were like, bright. And he's like, मैं भी old city से हूँ, तुम कहाँ से?
Huh? Oh.
ओल्ड सिटी में कहाँ से? So I was like, हाँ मैं यहाँ रहता हूँ. अच्छा, मैं सुल्तान शाही का हूँ. And he was from that time. So and his Urdu is like proper. And he was like meeting those kinds of people, and how they speak. I was like, इतनी साफ उर्दू तो हमारी भी नहीं है यार. And the way they dress and everything, I realized that this is the way like my grandfather used to dress, and he's like dressing the same way. And now we come in with a brand of dressing and thoughts and ideals, which is creating rift in like the entire like community we used to have.
Mhm.
So this is at least what I felt, and which is why like this question arises. So that is one thing. Besides that, has studying policy help you have a well-rounded or a better outlook on your work or society, and help you craft better stories?
Um, uh, Slight correction there about my policy experience. I did a certificate program with the Takshashila Institution for public policy, but my MA was in South Asian Area Studies from the SOAS University of London. So the public policy, it didn't help too much with the research part, but in terms of crafting certain arguments, certain uh, making certain assertions that I did in the book, you know, consulting different sources. That's what the public policy degree, because we had to do a that little certificate. We had to do like a 15, 20 word paper about strategic petroleum reserves. And some of not the actual research didn't overlap with my book and my writing, but certain research tactics, certain research methods were very helpful from that time I studied public policy. I did work in the public sector as well a bit too, you know, for in within the advocacy side back in the States as well. थोड़ी देर के लिए. So yeah.
Uh, Also, you mentioned a little bit about how the Marwari thing is happening, and I think I came across your articles. It was one of the first ones, and I shared it with my friends and like in our family groups and everywhere. And so one of the family members, they were like, karma has caught up with the Marwari community, because there was also like financing propaganda movies and everything. So do you think like is it like every few years every community bari by bari they're setting up their karma score, and then when they're at zero they can start from bottom. Sometimes it's the Muslim community, sometimes it's the Sikh community, and now like it is the Marwari community's turn.
अब देखिए certain communities like as I mentioned in my book, they they know how to they've blended themselves with the different power structures that that rise and fall in different eras. So और हर कौम का ऐसा होता. And like I said in the वो जो शेर जो था उमर फारूक खादरी chapter से में the very first lines from इकबाल, निशा यही है जमाने में जिंदा कौमों का कि सुबह शाम बदलती हैं इनकी तकदीरें. And these fortunes of these communities, sometimes they don't really do any active wheeling and dealing to ensure that they end up in a certain way they do. Sometimes it's just nature at work, or it's the usual rise and fall of any civilization or a people. There is that saying: hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. और वो cycle repeat होते जाता. So with respect to Marwaris, they've been an integral part of Hyderabadi society as well, ever since the third and fourth Nizams. However, like I said, ये outsider और अपनी ये son of the soil वाले का debate तो कुतुबशाही दौर के से है. So I mean, and people, veer different ways. Although I might be comparing apples and oranges here. Umar Farooq Khadri ka bhi, he for his granduncle and his grandfather and his family, they had to change tack with respect to their identities and certain practices if they were to revive their place in society. So these are very interesting debates about how people change, why people change, and these are fascinating topics for me.
Okay, you dodged that one very nicely. Okay, so one more question I had in mind is I don't know if you consider yourself as a journalist or not, but a lot of people, especially Saudi returns, when their kids be like, I want to be the next journalist, I want to go to Al Jazeera or whatever, parents be like, उनकी नजरों में आ जाएंगे. And a lot of these arguments and from relatives and be like you're new here and उनकी नजरों में आ जाएंगे तुमको नहीं मालूम यहाँ पर क्या होता है and similar things and especially with not even Saudi returns but journalists or people who want to get into journalism or writing in general. And I recently came across with one of the like a reporter story that what happened to him. And it is not something which is happening now. It has been happening since Gauri Lankesh. उनसे पहले भी हुआ, उसके बाद भी हुआ. Do you think like journalism is a safe career? I mean, even doctors are not spared, but still, do you think like in 2025 is journalism a good, lucrative, safe career which parents can endorse their kids into?
Wow, bit of a fraught question, and I'm glad you asked it. But besides the actual safety and the lucrativeness, before I even get to that, journalism mein kya hai malum? It's not a 9 to 5 profession. I've been mostly a features guy, but and not a hard news guy. But agar aap khususan hard news mein jana cha rahe na, which is the actual ground reporting, it's not a 9 to 5 gig. No way. You have to, go out onto the field at the wee hours of night if something happens to cover. I've literally seen. I won't name the organizations or the people. I've seen, people who say, "Oh, who have the talent. Talent hai. They have the way with words. They have the camera presence even. However, iflasi bahut hai उन लोगों में. अरे ट्रेन स्टेशन पे कुछ हुआ, वी नीड टू गो. नहीं, जरा नहीं, नमाज पढ़ने का है मेरे को, वहां से जुम्मे का दिन है, या नहीं जरा देर से उठा मैं नहीं, या कहीं जाने का है, वलीमे में जाने का है. These are excuses I've actually heard. You can't, ये नहीं चलता. I'm really sorry. And I've seen this. And I've also, heard stories of, St. Francis College malum na, great college for journalism. Turned out some decent journalists as well. A lot of these girls that go to St. Francis, they study journalism. फिर जब placement का भी time आता है ना, I've heard a lot of even Muslim journalists tell me this. मेरे को समझने, और these are mostly Muslim जो बाहर आते हैं, ना बोलते हम लोग को समझ में नहीं आता, ये लोग ये लड़कियां जर्नलिज्म पढ़ना चाह रहे हैं, लेकिन उनके घर वाले बोलते हैं कि 6 बजे के बाद घर में जाने नहीं देंगे उनको. If that's the case, fine. Then you have to desk pe raho. You can't be, and and if you want to go become that big journalist who's covered by who has bylines in Al Jazeera, becomes a staffer from Al Jazeera, ऐसे चाले नहीं चलते. ये lucrative safety, ये तो बहुत दूर की बात है. अता like I just, so journalism, and even if we were to venture out the realm of hard news, features ke liye bhi fine, you have extra time to get the story in, file the story. थोड़ा research का भी कर सकते, क्योंकि you can take extra time with research, but you also have to go to subjects' houses, ढूंढ निकाल के लाना पड़ता. Create those networks of people who you can call. I'm working on this story. Do you know somebody who can who can speak to me about this or guide me in the right direction. And sometimes that person knows somebody who knows somebody. ये cultivate करने के लिए आपको खुद field में जाना पड़ता. You have to create your own equity so that when somebody gives you a reference, they said ये इसके bylines इसके ये वो newspaper में ये सब एक trust create करना पड़ता और ये रातों रात नहीं आता. So we're putting the cart before the horse if we ask about lucrative and safe. I'm not saying those aren't valid concerns. I'll get to that as well. But that is one complaint I have with certain, certain Hyderabadi people of Hyderabadi origin who want to get into this field, who are already dabbling into it. I mean, you can't take long with even a lot of manuscripts. You have to have a certain urgency. Like for instance, certain people, they have contracts with big publishers. Like abhi tak ek manuscript bhi nahi de unla. But as for the lucrative, it's not lucrative as it once was. Somebody was actually telling me the other day for a potential assignment. They're like, Danesh, Khushwant Singh ka zamana gaya, where people used to read his the magazine which he was the editor for. And 2000 se, I would say mid 2000s to 2017-18 was a golden age of sorts for the Indian literature and publishing industry. Ab smartphones ka advent aa gaya, attention spans are low. So if non-fiction mein, if a book sells 10,000, then it's a bestseller. So yeah, I won't say don't get into it, but the thing is, I don't think us Hyderabadis, there are exceptions to this, but we're also not helpful to each other. Agar koi ye field mein aana cha raha hai, first and foremost, we look at this bacha ya bachi as competition. Ye ek crab mentality hai hum mein, and I have seen this in certain heritage circles as well. Everybody's out for themselves, which happens in outside of Hyderabad too. But once you add the lackadaisical nature, I think that makes it even worse.
Now that is very depressing, like you say, everything together. Now, I think first we have a bigger problem to solve than focusing on is it lucrative or safe, and that is a very different problem, and I think that not only seeps into journalism, but any career one goes into. If one is lazy, they can't come on time, they can't do their thing. I mean, which happened today with me also. I mean, I was a little late.
Hey, you apologize at least, and I appreciate that. Ye ek punctuality jo hai na, at least ek decorum. Look, I consider myself punctual, but there are even times where circumstances come up. But एक basic वो एक courtesy रहती, yeah, I'll be late or ये सब वो है. So I mean, these are things that need to be solved before we think about these careers. And I'd be more than happy. I'm always open to people क्योंकि अब वो बोलते ना सवाब जारिया, you give knowledge to people, it's only in your favor. So, but yeah, unfortunately, a lot of work needs to be done. And Urdu media ka, as much as I respect the work that a lot of these Urdu papers have done, the landscape, how they work, don't get me started on that.
The reason I asked about safety for journalists as well is because I've seen Yaqut Ali. I'm not sure if you know. His clip was there, how he used to go into the rallies rallies in UP of, people, Hindutva rallies. And he used to like record people, and people used to like throw his camera or ask him his name and everything. So that is some serious life threatening space that one is into. And after so many stories and everything, and there was this video titled "Why is it important to be a journalist, and more importantly a Muslim journalist," to highlight our point of view as well. So that is the reason I asked this question. And obviously, like you said, when it comes to the nature, one has to be very prompt, taking the camera and going. And if comparing Yaqut Ali and you mentioning the current circumstances, I feel like that is a whole different landscape he's dealing with, and we have a very different problem to solve. And
Let me just add one thing. I'm sorry to interrupt.
yeah.
If you read Mir Ayub Ali Khan's chapter, right? Chapter, I think that was chapter 5. Sarish Nanisati, great guy. He is the bureau chief of the Hindu. When I interviewed him for that chapter, and I included what he said, what I'm about to requote in that chapter. He said Hyderabad is a very strange place. We're home to a bunch of journalism schools, but most of our journalists are from outside. Isn't that enough of a telling statement for the most part? Like I said, exceptions like Ayub Ali Khan, Sayyid Muhammad, etc., 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 Yunus Lasania. But it's telling when most of your journalists, they're either North Indian or or from West Bengal or even Kerala, which is not a bad thing. Outside perspectives are welcome. I'm not trying to say Bengali Bhagao, Dakkan Bachao. No, 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 absolutely not. But there are these complaints from certain literateurs and journalists here. अरे उन्हें बाहर वाला है उसको क्या मालूम Bhagmati ki kitab by Mupia Basu. Again, one can disagree with the premise that Bhagmati existed. But I was told by somebody when my book was coming out, अरे दानिश अच्छा है तुम किताब लिख रहे हैं नहीं तो बाहर वाले लिखते रहते. I was like, appreciate the compliment, but I technically in certain aspects I'm a bahar wala. But अगर आप लोग नहीं लिखेंगे तो who's gonna write? कोई has we have to, at least from off the top of my head, Harun Khan Shirwani is how far one has to go back for the Bhagmati thing. Even though despite the fact that he denies her existence, I mean, I think us Hyderabadis, we need to do a better job as a society and a people in creating a better ecosystem so that for youngsters who want to get into journalism, literature, and if not make careers out of it, at least have some sort of side income out of it, ताकि हम लोग का narrative मंजर आम पे आए.
I agree with that totally, because in times which are changing rapidly, things which were relevant today might not be 2 days later. It is very important to know our history. It is very important to know where we came from, who we are, because a community which does not know its history, its origins, is kind of lost, because now they don't know who to relate with, and whatever people kind of impose on them, that you are this, you came from here, it is kind of like that small kid in family who will be told by all the elder brothers, tum to adopted ho yaar. And he kind of believes that for many years that he or she was adopted, and then they realize they were joking and they were pulling their legs. So that is going to happen with the community. I know it is eventually going to happen if we don't take it seriously. And the Deccan Archive, they do a great job. They their walks and everything. So as we're approaching time, I have perspective questions to bring things into perspective. So the first question is, if you were to go 10 to 15 years back in time, what would you speak to the younger Danish who is probably living in some multiverse? What advice would you give to that Danish, or what, like in any terms, like general, or be it in terms of writing or anything?
First and foremost, this may be a little a little depressing, but everyone's out for themselves. A lot of people are out for themselves, but that doesn't mean you don't stop doing what you do. You trudge on, and क्योंकि that's one thing I've also learned, that a lot of people who say they help, most of them help sometimes, but most of them also just don't. So I would tell them, and I would also tell them that don't be afraid to you know make ask people for stories. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, whether it's asking them for stories, asking them for connections. Yeah, they say that no, they say no because of the fact that they may or may not be out for themselves. But I would tell him you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and certain people's advices, take them with a grain of salt as well.
Perfect. Are there any books in specific or any routines you follow on a daily basis, or any book you keep coming back to? There are like few books which, I mean, I keep coming back to this book. It's like called The Courage to be Disliked.
Huh.
Uh, and I think this is my third or fourth time I'm reading. So are there any books or habits you follow on a daily which helps you, like be better?
I have not revisited a book because I've I follow a certain pattern of reading. One day I read 25 pages of English. The next day I read 10 pages of Urdu. और ये alternate होते रहता. And that's what I always follow. And sometimes that book, that English book or even Urdu book, it's for pleasure. But if it's for an assignment, then yeah, सोने पे सुहागा.
Oh, so any like routine in general?
Hmm. Get up early, exercise every other day as well, and then go about the day and try to get it started as early as possible. Because one thing is, Hyderabad is a city which I'm sure you've seen. बाज लोगों के आँख हाँ बाज क्या बहुत सारे लोगों के आँख 11 बजे खुलते. And if I get up at 9:30, I feel guilty. लेकिन हैदराबाद में it just you have to maintain a certain how should I say this, a certain mindset to ensure that you don't get engulfed by that iflasi behavior that people tend to show here. That go-getter attitude, the potential is there. By no means am I saying हम लोग inept या incompetent है, लेकिन hustle नहीं है हम लोगों में, unfortunately.
I think with time, hopefully things will change. There should be some hope. I mean, I wouldn't like to be completely pessimistic and uh, uh, you know take things down that route. Again, thank you so much for you know like kind of answering most of our questions. I mean, I don't have any questions, so all of our questions. So, where can people find your book? Can they order it on Amazon? Uh, and like, is that the best place they can order?
Yeah, that is one of the places. Um, there are also the websites of certain independent bookstores, which I'd also encourage people to buy from.
Yeah.
And it is available in Hyderabad. It is available at various outlets as well too. Yeah, so available online and wherever books are sold.
Perfect, perfect. So what I'll do is I'll add all the links in the description so people can go and check the book out as well. And in case you have any potential book readings or meetups, I think if I can share it with people, I would love to get them on and get into at least get the exposure of the book. I don't know how
Mhm.
many people read books these days. I mean, because I do. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird, but.
No, you're
Uh,
not weird. You're perfectly normal in my book, at least.
So again, thank you so much for joining us today, and for people listening and watching. Hope you have enjoyed the podcast so far, and let me know how you feel about the podcast. And do check out Danish Majid's work and see where we can take it from there. Until then, you all keep taking action, stay blessed, and let's catch you all in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
चलिए